The good provider is the most dangerous myth ever sold to the masculine soul. By the end of this protocol, you will understand why basing your identity on your ability to pay bills is not an act of nobility, but a strategic suicide. We are going to expose the economic reductionism data, the precise mechanism by which the system convinces you that your value as a man is directly correlated to your transactional output. I will reveal the conditional love metrics, proving that a man who is loved solely for what he provides is not loved at all. He is merely consumed. You will see how the mumbling of society, the endless praise for the hard-working father who sacrifices his dreams for a steady paycheck, is a psychological operation designed to turn you into a resource node for the state, the corporation, and a family unit that views you as an appliance. Before we close, I'll hand you the sovereign value protocol, the exact method to decouple your self-worth from your net worth and transition from a provider of goods to a provider of vision. If you think your duty is just to keep the lights on, you are the darkness in your own house. Drop and give me 20. Let's look at the price tag on your soul. The myth of the noble sacrifice. The soft world teaches you that the highest calling of a man is to provide. They show you images of the tired father coming home late, the man who works a job he hates to buy a house he doesn't own for a family he rarely sees. They call this heroism. The architect calls it systemic exploitation. When you accept the label of provider, you're accepting a contract where your utility is binary: 1, resource flowing, or 0, resource stop. You are reducing your complex multidimensional existence into a financial function. You become the draft horse of the grid. The draft horse is fed and housed only as long as it can pull the plow. The moment it breaks a leg, it is not healed, it is liquidated. By centering your identity on providing, you are building your entire life on a foundation of variable performance. If the economy crashes, if you get sick, if the war chest runs dry, you don't just lose your money, you lose yourself. You become the invisible man in your own home, seen only when the transaction fails. The ATM syndrome. Analyze the dynamic of the provider within the modern household. The provider creates a dependency loop. By solving every material problem with money, you deny your family the opportunity to develop anti-fragility. You train your wife to be a manager of logistics rather than a partner in mission. You train your children to be consumers of leisure rather than heirs to a legacy. You become the human shield against reality. You absorb the stress, the inflation, and the market volatility so that they can live in a bubble of comfort. This is not love. This is enabling. You are creating soft dependents who are incapable of surviving without your constant input. And what do you get in return? You get the love of the parasite. The parasite loves the host, but only because the host keeps it alive. This is transactional intimacy. It is a love that evaporates the moment the credit card is declined. The provider thinks he is buying loyalty. In reality, he is renting attention. The obsolescence of the wallet. In the old world, the man was the provider because he interfaced with the hard reality of the hunt and the harvest. He brought back the meat because he was the only one who could survive the kill. Today, the hunt has been replaced by the direct deposit. The corporate grid has made the acquisition of resources low friction. Anyone with a laptop and a compliance score can earn money. This means that your primary value proposition, I make the money, is non-unique. If your wife can earn her own money, which the state encourages to double the tax base, and the state provides safety nets, then the provider becomes obsolete. If you are nothing more than a paycheck, you are replaceable by a government check or a corporate salary. The soft men try to compensate for this by providing more. They buy bigger houses, nicer cars, more vacations. They are trying to outbid the market to keep their position. This is the inflation of insecurity. You are running faster on the treadmill just to stay in the same place. The silent resentment. The psychological cost of the provider protocol is a deep cancer-like resentment. You know, deep down, that you are being used. You feel it when you walk through the door and no one looks up from their screens. You feel it when you pay the tuition for a school that teaches your children to hate you. You feel it when you sacrifice your kinetic imperative and your dopamine sovereignty to work overtime, only to be told it's never enough. This resentment turns into passive aggression. You become the grumpy old man. You withdraw into the garage, the bottle, or the sports game. You mumble through your life, waiting for the permission to die. This resentment is the poison that kills the patriarch. You cannot lead people you resent. You cannot protect people you view as leeches. The system loves this resentment because a resentful man is a distracted man. He is too busy being angry at his family to be angry at the architecture of extraction that put him in the cage. The shift to the architect. The architect rejects the title of of provider. You are not a utility, you are an authority. You do not just provide resources, you provide vision, you provide order, you provide protection, you provide access to reality. From wallet to general, you stop measuring your value by the size of the transfer. You measure it by the discipline of the unit. Are your children strong? Is your partner aligned? Is the territory secure? The gift of friction. You stop shielding your family from the world. You introduce them to controlled hardship. You make them earn their leisure. You teach them the physics of value. You stop being an ATM and start being a trainer. The sovereign contract. You renegotiate the terms of your relationships. You are no longer buying love. You are building an alliance. The alliance requires contribution from all parties. If they consume but do not contribute to the mission, the resource flow stops. This is the power of the veto, the death of the beta bucks. The manosphere talks about beta bucks, the idea of the nice guy paying for affection. The provider protocol is the institutionalized beta bucks. It is the state-sanctioned simp. The architect kills this dynamic. You realize that your money is your energy. It is your war chest. You share it only with those who are in the trenches with you. You do not subsidize those who are soft. You utilize your resources to build the citadel, not to decorate the apartment prison. You move from providing comfort to providing legacy. The soft men will call you selfish or controlling. They will say you have a toxic view of family. Let them. They are the draft horses pulling the cart until their hearts explode. They are the ones who will be divorced, broke, and alone in a nursing home paid for by the state. You are the architect. You are building a dynasty, not a dependency. You are loved not for what you give, but for who you are. Reclaim your utility. The system wants you to be a battery. You choose to be the engine. You kill the provider. You birth the patriarch. The transaction is cancelled. The mission has begun. The leadership vacuum is the invisible black hole at the center of the modern household that swallows the provider's soul, his net worth, and his legacy without ever returning a single photon of respect. You have been conditioned to believe that your authority in the home is derived from your economic output, that the signature on the mortgage deed grants you the command of the vessel. This is a fatal miscalculation. Authority is not financial. Authority is biological, spiritual, and kinetic. When you reduce your contribution to the mere logistics of funding a lifestyle, you unwittingly abdicate the throne of the patriarch. You create a vacuum where your leadership should be, and because nature abhors a vacuum, that empty space is immediately filled by other forces: the state, the culture, the peer group, and the neuroses of a family that feels unprotected despite being fully funded. The soft man thinks that if he buys a bigger house, his wife will respect him more. He thinks that if he pays for the expensive private school, his children will listen to his guidance. He is wrong. He is trying to solve a spiritual problem with a material solution. The result is the silent mutiny, where the crew of your ship enjoys the food and the shelter you provide, while secretly despising the captain who refuses to take the wheel. The merchant cannot be king. In the archetypal structure of the masculine psyche, the king and the merchant are distinct energies. The merchant deals in transactions, negotiations, and the flow of goods. The king deals in law, order, defense, and vision. When you embrace the provider protocol as your primary identity, you are operating solely in the merchant archetype. You are telling your family, I will give you X, money/comfort, in exchange for Y, love/respect/obedience. This is a commercial contract, not a covenant. The problem with commercial contracts is that the counterparty is always looking for a better deal. If your authority is based on what you provide, then your authority is only as good as your last payment, and it is always vulnerable to a competitor who can provide more. A wife does not respect a merchant. She negotiates with him. A child does not follow a merchant. They consume from him. To command respect, you must embody the king archetype, which operates outside the realm of transaction. The king does not buy loyalty. He inspires it through competence, courage, and the unwavering enforcement of the boundary. The king provides direction, not just resources. If you are funding the expedition but not leading it, you are not the commander. You are the sponsor. Sponsors are thanked in the credits, but they are not remembered in the history books. The outsourcing of the soul. The most insidious aspect of the leadership vacuum is the tendency of the wealthy provider to outsource the critical functions of fatherhood and husbandry to professionals. You pay a tutor to teach your son math. You pay a coach to teach him discipline. You pay a therapist to help your daughter manage her emotions. You pay a contractor to fix the fence. You pay a landscaper to mow the lawn. On the surface, this looks like efficiency. You are using your high-value time to earn more money while delegating lower-value tasks. But to the architect, this is the liquidation of influence. Every time you outsource a task, you are outsourcing a bonding opportunity. You are outsourcing the friction required to transfer your values to your lineage. When another man teaches your son how to throw a punch or solve a problem, that man becomes the authority figure in that domain. When a therapist listens to your daughter's fears, that therapist becomes her emotional anchor. You become the ghost in the machine, the invisible financier who makes it all possible but touches none of it. You end up living in a house full of strangers who are being raised by the village you hired. You have bought yourself out of your own life. The high-resolution father knows that he must be the primary source of wisdom, discipline, and skill for his tribe. He may use tools, but he never hands over the blueprint. The covert contract of the nice guy. The provider often falls into the trap of the nice guy covert contract. This is the unspoken belief that because I am sacrificing my dreams to pay for this lifestyle, and because I am a good man who doesn't drink or cheat, you owe me sex, affection, and gratitude. This contract exists only in your head. Your family never signed it. When they don't deliver on their end of this imaginary deal, you feel betrayed. You become resentful. You start to keep score. I bought you that car. Why won't you sleep with me? I pay for this college. Why won't you study what I want? This transactional mindset is repulsive to the feminine soul and alienating to the developing child. It reeks of weakness. It shows that you are not doing these things out of a sovereign sense of duty or love, but as a bribe to purchase compliance. True leadership asks for nothing in return because the act of leading is the reward itself. The architect does not need gratitude to function. He does what is right because it is the standard he has set for himself. This independence from validation is exactly what generates the validation you seek. When you stop acting like a creditor demanding payment, you start looking like a leader worth following. The absence of the no. The defining characteristic of the leadership vacuum is the inability of the provider to say no, because the provider views his value through the lens of making his family happy, which he interprets as comfortable. He becomes a pathologically permissive parent and partner. He equates love with yes. He wants to be the cool dad or the supportive husband. He fears that if he sets a hard boundary or denies a request for a material good, he will lose their love. This is the logic of a slave, not a master. A leader defines reality by defining what is not allowed. The no is the wall of the fortress. Without the no, there is no structure, no discipline, and no safety. A child who is never told no grows up anxious and entitled because they have never felt the solid edge of a masculine boundary. They test you constantly, escalating their behavior, begging you to stop them, begging you to be the wall. When you respond with another yes, another purchase, another concession, you are failing the biological test. You are proving that you are weak. You are proving that you can be manipulated. And in the primal brain of your wife and children, a man who can be manipulated by his own family can be manipulated by the world. He is not safe. He is a resource to be harvested, not a castle to be defended. The specter of the state father. We must address the geopolitical consequence of your abdication. When you create a leadership vacuum in your home, you are inviting the state to become the surrogate father. If you do not teach your children values, the state school system will. If you do not provide a vision for the future, the corporate media will. If you do not enforce discipline, the legal system will. The soft provider thinks he is protecting his family from the system by earning enough money to buy his way out of it. He is wrong. By failing to install a sovereign operating system in the minds of his children, he is handing them over to the architecture of extraction. They become standardized units who look to the government for safety and to the corporation for identity. You have funded the creation of agents who will likely vote against your interests, despise your masculinity, and dismantle your legacy. You have paid for your own erasure. The architect understands that the home is a counter-insurgency unit. You are fighting a war for the hearts and minds of your lineage. You cannot win this war with a checkbook. You can only win it with presence, propaganda, the transmission of your truth, and the kinetic authority of a man who lives what he teaches. The restoration of presence. To close the vacuum, you must pivot from provision to presence. Presence is not just being in the room. It is being the center of gravity. It is the ability to hold the emotional tension of the household without collapsing. It is the ability to make a decision and stand by it, even if it is unpopular. It is the willingness to be the bad guy in the short term to ensure the survival of the unit in the long term. This requires a time audit. You must stop working the extra hours to buy the luxuries that no one needs and start investing those hours in the face time required to build a tribe. You must be the one to take your son into the woods. You must be the one to vet your daughter's suitors. You must be the one who leads the family ritual, who speaks the blessing, who sets the standard. You must become the source code of the family culture. Money is fuel. fuel, but you are the engine. Without the engine, the fuel is just a puddle waiting to be set on fire by an enemy. The decoupling of worth. Finally, you must perform the internal surgery of separating your ego from your utility. You are not a provider, you are a man. Your value is intrinsic to your biological reality, your connection to the divine, and your capacity for violence and creation. Even if you were stripped of every dollar, you would still be the patriarch if you retained your frame. This realization is the source of unshakable confidence. When you know that you can lead from a tent as effectively as you can lead from a mansion, you lose the fear of poverty. You lose the fear of the market. You become anti-fragile, and paradoxically, this fearlessness makes you a better provider. You take the risks that the soft men are too afraid to take. You build the businesses that require iron balls. You negotiate from a position of walk-away power, but you do it for the mission, not for the validation. You do it because it is what kings do, not because it is what servants must do to be fed. The leadership vacuum is the death of the West. It is the millions of homes with full refrigerators and empty souls. It is the silence of the fathers and the screaming of the children. You have the power to close the breach. You have the power to step back onto the throne, but it will cost you your comfort. It will cost you your nice guy badge. It will demand that you stop hiding behind your wallet and start standing behind your word. The ATM is out of order. The king is returning. The audit of your authority is complete. The most devastating abdication of the modern father is not the failure to provide bread, but the failure to provide truth. By the end of this protocol, you will understand why the public school system is not an educational institution, but a compliance factory designed to strip your children of their intellectual sovereignty before they can even pronounce the word. We are going to expose the hidden curriculum data, the precise psychological conditioning used to turn curious, kinetic, and boundless human potential into standardized units of the corporate state. I will reveal the authority transfer metrics, proving that when you send your son to a state institution for 8 hours a day, you are not educating him, you are surrendering him. You are handing over the source code of his mind to a system that views your values as a threat and your lineage as a resource to be harvested. You will see how the mumbling of the academic elite, with their obsession on socialization and equity, is a tactical distraction to keep you from realizing that your children are graduating with zero hard skills and a crippling dependency on external validation. Before we close, I'll hand you the apprentice protocol, the exact method to pull your children out of the indoctrination camp and reinstall the father as the primary source of wisdom, discipline, and reality. If you are paying taxes to a system that teaches your children to despise you, you are funding your own execution. Drop and give me 20. Let's look at the curriculum of your erasure. The architecture of the indoctrination camp. The soft man believes that school is a place where children learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. This is a lie that has been carefully cultivated since the Prussian industrial model was imported to the West. The true function of the compulsory schooling system is behavioral modification. It is designed to produce 3 specific outcomes: obedience, conformity, and dependency. Analyze the structure of the school day. It is a prison simulation. The bells ring to condition the child to move, not when they are finished with a task, but when the authority commands it. This destroys the attention span of the architect. It teaches the child that their internal interest is irrelevant. Only the external schedule matters. This is the training ground for the employee mindset. The architect does not move for bells. He moves for mission. By subjecting your child to 12 years of this conditioning, you are practically guaranteeing that they will lack the deep work capacity required to build a citadel. Furthermore, the system enforces intellectual fragmentation. Subjects are taught in isolation. History is separate from math, which is separate from science. This prevents the child from seeing the system's level truth. The architect understands that everything is connected. Math is the language of physics. Physics is the rulebook of history. History is the database of psychology. By fragmenting knowledge, the state ensures that the child never grasps the leverage points of reality. They learn to memorize facts, but they never learn to synthesize power. They become trivial pursuit champions rather than sovereign operators. The delegation of authority, the death of the father. When you outsource your child's education, you are outsourcing your patriarchal authority. In the eyes of a child, the person who holds the knowledge holds the power. If the teacher, the administrator, and the peer group are the sources of truth for 40 hours a week, and you are only the source of entertainment on the weekends, you are not the father, you are the wallet. This creates a values vacuum. You might teach your son to be strong, stoic, and honorable at the dinner table, but if he spends his entire day in an environment that rewards softness, victimhood, and consensus seeking, your signal is being jammed. The acoustic rot of the peer group is relentless. The school system aggregates children by age, cutting them off from the vertical transmission of wisdom from elders. Instead of learning learning from you, they learn from other confused, immature children. This is the Lord of the Flies legalized and funded by your property taxes. The soft man defends this by saying, but they need socialization. This is the mumbling of a man who has forgotten what a tribe looks like. Socialization in a school setting is pathological. It teaches children to navigate a hierarchy of bullying, gossip, and superficial status. It does not teach them collaboration. It teaches them compliance. Real social skills are learned by interacting with the real world, by talking to adults, by conducting business, by solving problems in the community. The architect rejects the socialization excuse. You don't want your children socialized by the mob. You want them civilized by the lineage. The curriculum of the void, what they don't teach, the most damning evidence against the system, is not what is in the textbooks, but what is missing. The state school system systematically withholds the hard skills required for sovereignty. Financial literacy. They teach calculus, which 99% will never use, but they do not teach taxes, debt leverage, asset allocation, or the history of fiat currency. They want your children to be workers, not capitalists. Critical thinking. They teach what to think, not how to think. They reward the repetition of the approved narrative. A child who questions the premise is labeled disruptive. The architect prizes disruption, violence, and defense. They preach zero tolerance, which punishes the victim of bullying as severely as the aggressor. This teaches the child that self-defense is immoral and that they must rely on the state, the teacher, for protection. This is the castration of the instinct. The architect teaches that the capacity for violence is the only thing that guarantees peace. By withholding these skills, the system creates a dependency loop. Your child graduates unable to balance a checkbook, unable to start a business, and unable to defend themselves physically. They are forced to rely on the bank for money, the corporation for a job, and the police for safety. They are born debtors to the grid. The apprentice protocol, the return of the shadow. The architect does not help with homework. The architect destroys the syllabus. You must implement the apprentice model. In the old world, the son stood in the shadow of the father. He watched him work. He handed him tools. He absorbed the silent knowledge of the trade. You must recreate this dynamic. 1. The shadowing mandate. Your children must see you in your element. They must see you negotiate, see you build, see you struggle, and see you win. If you are a white-collar worker, you don't hide your work. You explain the game theory of your office. You teach them the physics of value by showing them how you extract resources from the market. They need to understand that money is not magic. It is the result of solved problems. 2. The hard skills curriculum. You become the professor of reality. You teach them the skills that the school fears, the gun and the blade. You teach them ballistics, safety, and the ethics of lethal force. You demystify the weapon so they respect it but do not fear it. The ledger. You open your books. You show them the mortgage, the electric bill, the investment portfolio. You teach them the difference between an asset and a liability before they are 10 years old. The build. They must learn to manipulate the physical world. They must fix the sink, build the fence, change the oil. A child who can manipulate matter feels a sense of agency that a child with an iPad never will. 3. The library of the sovereign. You curate the inputs. You fill your house with books that have stood the test of time, the classics, the biographies of great men, the manuals of war and strategy. You forbid the young adult sludge that promotes emotional fragility. You force them to read at a level above their age. You discuss ideas, not events. You train them to spot the logical fallacy and the propaganda technique. You are immunizing them against the mind virus of the collective. The logistics of the exit. The ultimate goal is the total withdrawal from the state system, homeschooling. The soft men will scream, "I don't have time," or "I'm not qualified." This is the learned helplessness speaking. You do not need a degree to teach a child. You need dedication. The state school wastes 7 hours a day on crowd control and administration. You can achieve higher academic results in 2 hours of focused, deep work at home. If you cannot withdraw immediately due to the provider trap we discussed, you must implement supplemental sovereignty. You treat school as a holding cell and the home as the real school. You explicitly deconstruct the lies they learn during the day. The teacher told you X? Let's look at why that is a simplification for the masses. You teach them to be spies in enemy territory. They play the game. They get the grade, but they know it is a game. They do not internalize the status hierarchy. The hybrid approach. You pool resources with other architects in your social autarky. You hire a private tutor for the group. You create a pod. You rotate the teaching of hard skills among the fathers. One teaches mechanics, another teaches coding, another teaches grappling. You are building a parallel institution, the legacy of the mind. The soft man leaves his children money. The architect leaves his children a framework. When you reclaim the role of the sovereign educator, you are giving your lineage the ultimate hard asset, a mind that cannot be colonized. You are raising children who are biologically indigestible to the system. They will not be the employees of the future. They will be the owners. They will not be the subjects. They will be the rulers. The state wants your child to be a cog. You want your child to be the engine. The war for the future is not fought on the battlefield. It is fought in the classroom of the kitchen table. The indoctrination camp is closed. The academy of the architect is open. The audit of their minds is your responsibility. The final act of the architect is not the accumulation of wealth, but the encoding of will. By the end of this protocol, you will possess the legal blueprint to ensure that your war chest survives the greatest threats to its existence, the predation of the state and the incompetence of your own progeny. We are going to dismantle the inheritance delusion, the naive belief that simply leaving a pile of cash to your children is an act of love. In reality, it is an act of economic euthanasia. I will reveal the entropy data, proving that 90% of family fortunes are decimated by the third generation because the soft heirs were given the resources of a king without the discipline of a warrior. I will reveal the juridical shielding metrics, showing how the dynastic trust acts as an immortal, artificial person that holds the line long after your biological heart has stopped beating. You'll see how the mumbling of the estate planning industry, with its focus on tax compliance rather than legacy enforcement, is designed to facilitate the churning of assets back into the banking system. Before we conclude, I'll hand you the dead hand protocol, the exact method to rule from the grave, ensuring that your capital is used only to fund the mission and never to fund the decay. If you are building an empire only to have it sold for parts by a drug-addicted grandson, you are not an architect. You are a temporary anomaly. Drop and give me 20. Let's look at the contract with eternity. The shirtless to shirtless curse. History is clear. The first generation creates it. The second generation freezes it. The third generation destroys it. This is the cycle of entropy. The provider, operating under the soft man logic, thinks that leaving his children financial freedom is the goal. He wants them to have the life I never had. This is a tactical error. When you remove the friction of survival from a human being without replacing it with the friction of mission, you create a monster. You create the trust fund baby, a biological organism that consumes high-quality resources but produces zero value. The dynastic trust is the weapon used to break this cycle. It transforms the concept of ownership. In the architect's lineage, no one owns the assets. The trust owns the assets. You are not leaving money to your children. You are leaving money for the administration of the family values. Your children do not become owners. They become beneficiaries and stewards. This distinction is critical. An owner can sell the asset to buy a Ferrari. A steward can only use the income of the asset to maintain the estate. By severing the legal right of your heirs to liquidate the capital, you are saving them from their own inevitable moments of weakness. You are installing a governance layer between their impulses and your hard work. The juridical person, the immortal captain. The dynastic trust is a juridical person. Unlike you, it does not age, it does not get dementia, it does not get divorced, and it does not die. It is a sovereign legal entity. When you transfer your war chest, your land, your businesses, your gold, your Bitcoin into the trust, you are effectively uploading your financial soul into a machine that runs on a specific code. This code is the trust deed. The soft man writes a will. A will is a one-time transfer of property. It is a liquidation event. The architect writes a constitution. The trust deed dictates exactly how the resources can be deployed for the next 100 years. The incentive clause. The trust does not give handouts. It matches production. If your heir earns $100,000, the trust distributes $50,000. If they earn zero, the trust distributes zero. This forces them to remain kinetically active in the marketplace. The trust rewards the hunter, not the gatherer. The educational mandate. The trust will pay 100% for education, specifically in the hard skills defined in the previous protocol. It will fund the apprenticeship. It views education as capital expenditure, capex, not consumption. The family bank. The trust does not give money, it lends money. If an heir wants to start a business, they must present a business plan to the trustees. The trust acts as a venture capitalist. It provides the seed funding in exchange for equity or repayment. This teaches the heir the physics of risk while keeping the capital within the family ecosystem. Defense against the state. The estate tax firewall. The state views your death as a taxable event. They have instituted the death tax, estate tax, specifically to prevent the rise of sovereign dynasties. They want to reset the score to zero every generation so that the population remains dependent on the labor market. If you hold assets in your personal name, the state will confiscate 40% to 50% of your empire the moment you die. This forces your heirs to sell the family land or the family business just to pay the tax bill. This is the state-sanctioned liquidation of the lineage. The dynastic trust, specifically the irrevocable trust, is the firewall. Because the assets are owned by the trust and the trust does not die, the assets are technically never transferred upon your death. They simply remain where they are, under the management of the trustees. You have effectively removed your wealth from the jurisdiction of the mortality tax. You have achieved fiscal immortality. The soft men mumble about losing control when they move assets into an irrevocable structure. They don't realize that they are gaining perpetuity. You are trading the illusion of personal ownership for the reality of generational security. The governance structure, the council of elders. Who runs the machine when you are gone? The soft man names his wife or his eldest son as the trustee. This is dangerous. Emotional bonds compromise tactical judgment. The architect builds a council. The professional trustee. You hire a cold-blooded professional, a corporate trustee, or a specialized law firm to handle the administration. They do not care if your grandson is crying for money. They only care what the deed says. They are the enforcers of the dead hand, the family board. You establish a board of family members, your most competent heirs, who act as advisors. They can vote on the vision, but they cannot override the constitution. This forces the family to meet regularly, to discuss the mission, and to practice the art of governance. The protector. You appoint a protector, a trusted third party who has the power to fire the trustee if they go rogue. This is your checks and balances system. This structure creates a meritocracy. The heir who displays the architect's mindset rises to the family board. The heir who displays the addict's mindset is marginalized and kept on a strict allowance, the spendthrift clause, to prevent them from hurting themselves or the reputation of the lineage. The asset protection cloak. The dynastic trust also serves as a legal cloak. In the litigation economy of the West, success makes you a target. If you own assets in your own name, a frivolous lawsuit, a divorce, or a car accident can wipe you out. The system is designed to redistribute wealth from the producer to the victim. When your assets are in the dynastic trust, you are judgment-proof. You own nothing, yet you control everything. If someone sues you personally, they find an empty shell. They cannot seize the assets of the trust because you do not own them. The trust is a separate entity that was not involved in the accident. This is the strategy of the ghost. You walk through the world with zero net worth visibility, while your trust holds the keys to the citadel. This protects your heirs from gold diggers and predatory spouses. A prenuptial agreement can be challenged, a dynastic trust established years before the marriage is ironclad. You are protecting your lineage from the biological mismatch of a bad mating choice. The ethical will, the soul of the machine. Finally, the architect understands that the legal documents are just the hardware. The software is the ethical will. This is a document or a series of videos where you articulate the why. You explain the philosophy of the death of the provider. You explain the kinetic imperative. You record your voice, your values, and your warnings. This ethical will is read to the heirs annually at the family assembly. It is the renewal of the vow. It ensures that the money never becomes value neutral. In the West, money is seen as a tool for pleasure. In your lineage, money is defined as stored energy for the execution of the mission. The ethical will acts as the cultural immune system. It reminds the fourth generation, who never knew you, that they are not rich kids. They are soldiers of the lineage with a well-funded armory. Conclusion: the long game. The soft man lives for Saturday night. The provider lives for retirement. The architect lives for the day he has been dead for 100 years. When you implement the dynastic trust, you are admitting that you are mortal, but you are refusing to let your work be mortal. You are accepting that you cannot control the future, but you can rig the game in favor of your blood. You are moving from the checkers of monthly bills to the 3D chess of centuries. The death of the provider is now complete. You have killed the ATM. You have stopped the bleeding of your time, your authority, and your education. You have fortified the citadel, and now you have locked the gates so that only the worthy may enter. The protocol is executed. The architect rests, but the architecture endures.